Hey, how's it going, guys? So from the last video, I covered some of the important information on Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. In this video, we're going to utilize Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API, and we're going to create a program in Python. Alright, so here's the agenda, and these are the things we'll be doing in this exercise. So in this video, I'll walk you to how to enable Google Text-to-Speech API service. I'm going to skip how to create a Google Cloud project since I already have a video showing you how to create a brand new Google Cloud project from scratch. And we'll create a service account. So a service account in Google Cloud project is a special type of account. And this account is intended to represent a non-human user that needs to authenticate and authorize to access data in Google APIs. And we'll also download the service account client file, which is going to be in JSON format. Then we'll create a Python virtual environment for this project. Then we'll activate the environment and install the text-to-speech Python client library. And followed by, I'll go over the text-to-speech API documentation. And finally, we'll create a Python script to learn how to use the text-to-speech API. Alright, so let's start with item number 1, which is enable the text-to-speech API service. So what I want to do is I want to go to console.cloud.google.com, and that will take you to the dashboard page. If you are new to Google Cloud Platform, then I'll recommend you create a new account first, then create a new project. And fortunately, Google makes the process pretty easy, straightforward, unlike some other services such as Microsoft Azure, which takes me a bit of time to learn how to set up properly. And once you create a project, so here I'm going to select my project. And my project is going to be Google Cloud Demo. I'm going to select the project I want to use. Next, you want to click on Navigation menu, APIs and Services, and click on Library. And here we want to enable the service that I want to use. And it's going to be text-to-speech. And here we have 3 results. We want to select the second one, Cloud Text-to-Speech API. And just make sure that Cloud Text-to-Speech API is enabled. Now let's go back to the dashboard. So we have enabled Google Text-to-Speech service. Now we need to create a service account. So again, go back to the navigation menu, APIs and Services, and click on Credentials. On the top, you want to click on Create Credentials. And we have 3 different types of credentials, API key, OAuth client ID, and service account. And choose Service Account. And here we need to give our service account name. I'm going to call this Demo Text-to-Speech. We can also enter the description to describe what the account is used for. And next, click on Create. Now a service account is created. Click on Done to finish. Now we need to download the service account client file. And unfortunately, you cannot just click on this account, and there's no option for you to download the client file. And if you click on this add item, and on the top, it only gives you the option to add a new key or change the permission. Let's go back to navigation menu, and want to click on I am an admin, and click on service accounts. And I want to download the client file for demo text-to-speech, this account right here. Under the actions column, click on Create Key. I'm going to choose JSON as my key type and click on Create. And a pop-up window is going to show up. And I'm going to save this file. And I'll save this file under my project folder. And I'll just save that to my text-to-speech folder. Let me close this. And I'll name this demo service account. Alright, so here's my service account client file. Now I can close this. Alright, so where are we? So we're going to create a Python virtual environment. So let me do this. So let me create my virtual environment in my Python VMV folder. So I'm going to open a command window. Let me open a new one. And let me change the directory to the, And let me change the directory to my Python VMV window. Oh, it should be H drive. Okay. To create an isolated Python virtual environment, so use the command python -m VMV. And I know a lot of people like to use the name VENV for virtual Python environment. I'm going to name my project Google Text-to-Speech Demo. And I'll create a new project folder. So right here. Now let me move the files. Here's some of the project files. So I'll move my service account client file. And I'll use VS Code for this exercise. So I'm going to open VS Code. And I'll create a new file. And I'll just name this file demo.py. Right now my environment is pointing at PyQt5. So I want to change that to the new environment. So select interpreter. And I want to choose Google Text-to-Speech Demo. Now display your terminal. And by default, VS Code is going to automatically recognize this environment. Alright, so we have done item 1, 2, and 3.1. Now we need to do 3.2. Alright, so let's go over the documentation first. Here's the documentation page pointing at client libraries. And under installing the client library, we want to choose Python. Then we're going to copy this pip install statement. Let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to just copy and paste. And they'll install the text-to-speech client library. And once the text-to-speech client library is installed, you can now officially use the API for your development. And before we do that, let's go over the documentation first. Here's the pip install statement. And here's how to start your authentication. And because I'm using Windows, I'm going to follow the instruction on Windows. And from the instruction, Google recommends that you create an environment variable and assign the client JSON file path to that variable. I'm going to use a different approach. I want to create my environment variable in my Python script. And here's an example on how to use the text-to-speech API. So I want to point out something that from this example, the documentation is using text-to-speech module. If we go to the left and expand REST reference, here we have v1 and v1 beta1. And this is actually the correct library that you should be using. I noticed that text-to-speech module is not up to date as this v1 version. That means we'll look at the reference from this v1 module. Alright, so basically you have two different classes. One is text, the other one is voices. And the text resource is the one that we'll primarily focus on. And the voices resource will simply, here, let's go into the documentation. will simply provide you with a list of important or useful information. In this case, will be a list of voices that you can use. So right here, the list of voices. And types are basically different enumeration values. So we have male voice, female, and neutral. Now let's go into this text resource. And I want to go into synthesize reference. Right, so this API is pretty easy to use. From the request body, we have an input and voice that we want to use, and audio configuration. So that's basically the tone and the speed of the voice. And if the API call is successful, then the response body is going to contain data with the following structure. So this is the structure. And that's pretty much it. Right, we don't need to worry about this. And for the input, we can provide a regular text or XML format, which is a voice HTML markup, which I won't go into too much detail on. And this is the voice parameter, so we can set the language code if we want to translate a text to different language, such as Chinese, Japanese, French. Then we can set the language code. And the name is the voice template name. And we can set the voice gender, male, female, or neutral. And here's the audio configuration JSON representation. Now let's go into our Python editor. I'll start by importing the IO module. And from google.cloud, I want to import text-to-speech _v1. Here, let me do this. I'll also import the regular text-to-speech module as well. Now let me move this to the right. Let me run these 3 lines. Now if we print the attributes and methods of both modules, that's for text-to-speech. And this is for text-to-speech v1. And noticing that we have 2 more items at the end, services and types. Now let's go back to our Python script. So I want to create my environment variable first. So I'll enter the variable name, Google application credentials. And I'll grab the client service account file name. Now I can create my text-to-speech client instance. So I'll name this instance client. So from text-to-speech v1, I want to reference text-to-speech client class. Now I need a sample text to translate the text into audio. Let me just grab something from the documentation. Right, so I'll grab this paragraph. And I'll save the paragraph in a variable called text. Enable for the API to accept the text as a valid input parameter value. From text-to-speech v1 module, we need to insert the synthesis input method. And I'll name the output as synthesis _ input. And the parameter name is called text. Then we can send the text variable. Now let's run line 5 to line 13 first. Now if I print synthesis input object, and this is what the input format looks like. So if we print the object type, and it's going to return as a synthesis input object. Now we can configure the voice, and I'll name the output as voice. So from text to speech v1, I want to insert the voice selection params method, and I want to specify the language parameter. It should be language code, and the gender. So it's going to be enumerator value, and the parameter name is called ssml underscore gender. And for to know all the available enum values, so here what we can do is we can insert the text to speech v1 module, the ssml voice gender, and we can print the output. Oh, it should be, I should insert the function. Right. So we have female, male, neutral, and this one you don't have to worry about, since on the documentation it recommends you not to use this value. I'll use male. So text to speech v1, ssml voice gender, male. And for the language code, I'm going to assume that you didn't know all the language code. And it's going to be pretty easy to Google search a list of available language code. I want to set the language code to English. And I want to set the region. Let's do India. And as I mentioned from the previous video, this is a list of available voices template that you can choose from. And to know all the available voices, from the client object, we can reference the list voices method, and that will return all the templates. If we want to use a preset voice, then we need to provide the template name and the language code. So here, let's do this. Let's do method number 1. And method number 2. I'll code this voice 1. I'll code this voice 2. So for the template name, let me use something I recognize. Okay, let's go with Korean, I guess. I don't know Korean, but I think this one will be interesting. And the language. And let me change this to English. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate the voice file for voice 1 first. Then we're going to generate the voice file for voice 2. Now we need to configure the output file. So let's code this. Actually, here let me insert notes. Output file config. I'll name this output as audio config. And from text to speech v1 library, audio config. And this should be a section called audio config. And the required parameter is this audio encoding. So we can save the output as these following outputs. And the only thing I know is MP3. And I've never used linear 16 or this one before. So I'm going to use MP3. So from audio config parameter, and it's going to be text to speech v1, the audio encoding, the MP3. And as I mentioned before, there are other parameters that you can specify, such as the speaking rate, I think that's the value, the pitch, value gain dB, and some other things. So you can play around with it, but for now I just want to show you how to use the API. And once you know how to use the API, you can basically play around with different parameters on your own. Now we can finally generate our audio by string. So I'll name the output as response. So from client synthesize speech method, we need to provide input, and the input is going to be coming from synthesis input object, voice, and audio config. Oh, this should be voice 1. So let's do response 1 and response 2. Then we can save the byte string or binary as an Azure file. So here I'm going to say that we open. I want to name the first file audio file 1.mp3. It's going to write as binary as output 1. Then we can write the file from response object, it's response 1 dot audio content. And we'll do the same for the audio file. And this will be response 2. Right, so that's basically it. Now let me clean out the script. I'm going to terminate this session. I'm going to press F5 to run the script. And here language code is now, oh, let me take a look. So 26. And this should be singular. I'm trying again. Audio config. And we have a key error. Oh, so this should be audio encoding. Alright, let me clear everything. And we press F5 to run the script again. Okay. And looking at this error message, requires contains an invalid argument. So I guess it's this one here, voice 2. And it doesn't support English Korean for the language code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my voiceless. Oops. Let's choose a different voice. Let me use a template that I know. So let's do Vietnamese. So VI, Vietnam with net -D. So basically we are asking the text-to-speech API to use a Vietnamese dialogue to say this paragraph. Let me go back to my folder, make sure that nothing's saved. Okay, let me try again. Alright, so this time the script successfully ran the file. Now let's go back to my folder. In here's audio file number 1, audio file number 2. Let me increase my volume so we can listen to the file. Okay, now I'm going to play audio file 1.
Within, you manage access control by defining who identity has what access role for which resource. For example, compute engine virtual machine instances, Google Kubernetes engine, GKE clusters, and cloud storage buckets are all.
Okay, I think that's enough. So from our script, we specify that we want an Indian person in English to say this message. Now let's run file number 2.
With IAM Humanic Access Control by defining who identity has what access role for which resource, for example, compute engine, virtual machine instances, Google Kubernetes engine.
So from this voice selection params, so we specify one Vietnamese voice, and the language code is set to Vietnamese as well. But yeah, so just everything I want to go over in this tutorial, and just play around with different settings to see what interests you and what not. Alright, so this is everything I want to cover for this Google Text-to-Speech API in Python tutorial, and hopefully you guys found the video useful. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys on the next video.